friends, and welcome to episode 103 of Did You Bring the Hummus podcast. I'm Kimberly, your host, and I'm super excited to be here with you today. Did You Bring the Hummus is a podcast for all things vegan. Episodes post every Monday on your favorite podcast app. Before we get started, I have one very important question for you. Did you bring the hummus? Do you love the podcast? Want to help me keep it going? Visit the Support the Podcast tab on my website to learn more. Join me on alternating Mondays and Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern for an hour of meditation. Sign-up options include individual sessions, a monthly subscription, or a 10-session package good for 6 months. I have joined forces with Jennifer Shlomovich of The Confident Vegan on a project, That Vegan Morning Show, which airs on YouTube every Monday at 7 a.m. Eastern. Join our mailing list and get a free recipe ebook for some of our favorites. Today, I am joined by longtime vegan Tim Barford of VegFest UK and his new venture, Why Go Vegan. Tim was born in the 60s in the UK, conceived the same day as Ringo Starr joined the Beatles, brought up on impeccable musical tastes, and at 6 years old, 50 miles downwind of Woodstock, he was born to rock and roll. Living in Greece as a child in the early 70s, Tim forged a long-standing bond with what he calls a true and trusted friend and revered companion throughout his life. Hummus, of course. All 6 of Tim's great-aunts, born in the 1890s, were vegetarian from birth, and his dad was brought up vegetarian, although by the time he was 10, that had changed. So it seems avoiding animal flesh has always been in the family. Tim describes himself as a holistic vegan, someone who is vegan for all of the beneficial reasons, eats a whole food plant-based diet, understands and advocates for the animal rights position, challenges property status of animals, and works on self-transformation. In this episode, you'll hear Tim's journey to veganism, how he managed his vegan lifestyle on the road at festivals in the 1980s, his path to creating the largest VegFest in the UK, all about his newest venture, Why Go Vegan, and so much more. I had a wonderful time chatting with Tim, and I learned so much. Get ready to laugh and to think. Hey, Tim, welcome. I'm so glad you're here with me today.
Hello. Yes, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Tell me about your vegan journey.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm now 62 this year. So I'm going to have to roll back until 1980, which is, 45 years ago. I was 17, and a couple of pals, a pal of mine who's a bit older than me, paying a visit. I was still living with my mum and dad. I was at college, it's pretty radical. I was sort of kind of punk type, kind of punk hippie, actually, a bit of a cross for the punk hippie. But it's having fun. And this friend of mine, my brother's friend, he declared that he was vegetarian. And he said, my mum asked him why, and he said, "Oh, well, it makes me less violent." And my ears pricked up at that. I thought, oh, wow, that's a really kind of cool statement to make, actually.
Yeah.
And not that I was a violent at all. I was the opposite, really. I was properly into already, sort of playing guitar. I was in bands. I was definitely alternative, rock and roll, very much peacekeeper. Violence was not on our menu. That was for the people who got drunk and went out and had fights on a Saturday night. That wasn't our at all. No, we were the opposite. So I just thought this was really cool. So I thought, I'm going vegetarian there, really, mainly to annoy my mum and dad, actually. And I thought this would kind of be a really radical thing, It's just like, I've already done the safety pin, I've dyed my hair, and then I sort of been a snotty teenager. What can I do next? Oh, I know, let's go vegetarian. So I did. And I was pretty much what I now call pretty much plant-based. I ate a pretty much plant-based diet. It was always a whole food plant-based. So I was eating a lot of good stuff, actually, from an early age. I also took part in a lot, all through my 20s and stuff. But it was in when I was 21, 1984. And I bumped into this anarchist collective of animal rights activists up in a chap town in Leeds, which was right in the heart of the miners' strike, 1984 in Yorkshire. Under Thatcher's Britain was a pretty grim social time, deprivation, violence, state-sanctioned violence. And indeed, we'd been on the end of some of that with festivals. We'd been sort of, attacked by the police, dragged off, put in jail and stuff, and all sorts of terrible things. And that's when I was in Leeds, and I was with my partner, and we were just going to have a baby actually, and then I came across veganism, and it was like, wow, this is amazing, and I went vegan straight away overnight.
Wow.
There and there. So this is just what absolutely. And that was that really. There's a couple of relapses in the 80s, there's a couple of times kind of. Well, I remember once actually deliberately going to eat some meat, because I'd split up with my partner, I was split up with my child, and I was feeling pretty miserable. I kind of threw my values out the window and started to try some meat in a restaurant. And there's one mouthful, I spat it out and realised, actually, no, that's not such a good idea. And that's it, really. I've been vegan ever since. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think, I went vegetarian in 2001, and I talk about vegan cheese all the time back in 2001, how it just was so bad. It was so and how we've come so far. And when you had mentioned, when we talked earlier about how you'd gone vegan in the 80s, anytime someone tells me that, I'm like, oh gosh, all the terrible cardboard tasting things you must have been eating. But you mentioned that you were already very much into the whole foods. And so you weren't kind of feeling that deprivation. You were like eating this full bounty of fruits and vegetables and really just living it up that way. That's amazing.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I was probably more interested in partying than eating. But I would eat out of more kind of, because I knew that good fuel was important. So, I would eat, yeah, fruits. I've always been big on fruit. Always liked raw foods. I've always had a good sense. I've always been, lentils, chickpeas. These are like, yeah, love them. Obviously, one or two other things, come into it. There was always a great variety, and I was living on the road at that time, and I just have a little stove or a little wood burner, or maybe cooking outside on an open fire, and I was living pretty simply, but I was living well, and of course, at the festivals too, all the way through the 80s. Not as developed as it is now, but it was always a haven for plant-based options. And, there were definitely cafes, especially at some of the bigger festivals that we go to in the summer, that would be serving up, there would be vegetarian at least, but there would be animal-free food easily available, and good food too, properly done by people who were living wholesome, pretty radical lives on the road, maybe living in teepees or living in benders or trucks, buses. I mean, that was that whole culture. And I kind of borrowed it from the Merry Pranksters, actually, for USA listeners, those of you who go back to a certain era of, the early 60s when the Merry Pranksters sort of set off on a multicoloured bus around the west coast of America, and up to all sorts of crazy antics and such like, all of which are written about in books that you can easily access. And people came over from the West Coast, and that sort of living in buses, hippie culture was big in the UK. I mean, it still is, but it was really big in the 80s. And with it came a lot of that vegetarian, vegan, plant-based culture too. Hippie culture was, we used to joke, even in the 80s, it was like, oh yeah, you're all rainbow lentils. Uh, uh, Whether that was said affectionately or
Right.
slightly taking the mickey depended. But I was always proud to be a rainbow lentil. Yeah, that's no problem with. I'm okay with lentils for sure. Yeah.
Me too. I love that. What an interesting time, and how lucky to be in to be part of a movement where it was normal and expected that there would be vegans and vegetarians amongst the groups, and that you'd have options when you're out with your friends or partying or at these festivals, that you'd have the ability to eat food that it wasn't just like French fries and a dry salad.
Yeah, I mean, to a degree, I mean, it was back in 1984 when I first went vegan. I mean, the culture was pretty much, I mean, people were on the dole. This was Thatcher's Britain, mentioned a time of real social deprivation, with the miners' strike, all the mines getting shut down, a tough winter.
Mm.
You know, the dole was never, well, it's never been a lot. You know, social benefits, there's never been enough to live on. But you know, it was sort of white sliced bread and cans of baked beans and chips
Mm.
was the staple vegan diet. So unless you kind of, you know, went out of your way a bit and made sure. But I said I was always really into whole foods, and even I remember as early as 1983, which is before I went vegan. I was living up on site in outside Salisbury, not far from Stonehenge, which is where the big annual festival was.
Mhm.
And me and my friend drove a van from Salisbury up to Bristol, which is about a couple of hours drive, to a big whole food warehouse where you could go in and buy like sacks of whole foods, and spent about £300, which back in the day, like now, was probably, I don't know, you could almost stick a zero on that. Maybe not quite that much, but it'd be more like spending about £1,000 or $1,500 on sacks, and we just filled the back of this truck up the site with all this whole foods, and kind of shared it around. So all of us were living off jumbo oats. Whole grain flour, brown rice. This is. I was all over that.
Mhm.
That's my first business actually. It was a sort of little health food shop, really, a mobile health food shop.
Oh, that's
So
neat.
most of it I just gave away and we kind of ate communally, but that was the idea, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you didn't make that effort, if you weren't really like a foodie, then yeah, very much. That early vegan diet was I wouldn't say unhealthy, but it wasn't an optimum health. No,
Mm.
so obviously definitely healthier than eating,
Mm.
non-vegan diet.
Yeah.
But of course that was just at home. I didn't go out eating. It wasn't my culture. I wasn't going out. I wasn't going to restaurants or anything. I
Mm.
very rarely did that. That'd be only once or twice, maybe if you're in London visiting, you had nowhere to cook, then you'd go out and eat out of
Mhm.
necessity. Yeah.
So you mentioned your first business, and you kind of have an entrepreneurial spirit. You kind of been creating and leading.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is one of the things that I first learned about you was that you have created, and you may have done other things before this. I'd love for you to talk how you got to this point, but you run or organize or have created one of the biggest veg fests in the UK, right?
Well, and it's time in the world. Yeah, I mean, it's one of the biggest in the world back 20 years ago. We
Mm.
started in 2003. And by 2012, we had 20,000 people visiting over 3 days in the middle of this.
Wow.
Yeah, that was probably the biggest in terms of numbers. And that's still, I think, the biggest gathering of vegan event in the UK.
Mm.
But it was the biggest in Europe at the time, and there have been bigger ones since. I know in America, a place like Toronto got really big veg fest. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, it would have been, And then we went to Olympia. Again, we're doing big shows, so like 300 stall holders, 20 talks rooms, 200 speakers, 15,000 visitors over 2 days. It's a real. Well, that was all sort of a decade ago now. That was like 2015, 16, 17, 18. But yeah, and we're still doing them now. I mean, I've got a show in Bristol, in about, in a couple of months. Do 4 or 5 shows this year, but they're a lot smaller now. They're probably more like 100 stall holders, maybe 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 visitors, one day, maybe 2 talks rooms, some live music, but it's still a really good vibe. It's really down to earth. It's all independent traders. There's community events. Unfortunately in the UK, as with I'm sure other countries, but the UK has been really hammered for independence, festivals, anything small has really struggled. The money's gone into the big business. Supermarkets. So this is all a legacy of COVID, really, and lockdowns. The bigger multinationals have grown, and they're the ones who've been able to do with Brexit too. Brexit's hammered the independents. Brexit's left the European Union, and the UK's economy has been absolutely trashed. As they're beginning to recover, but of course that's coupled with global and particularly us veganism going mainstream, was really hit the independents. In many ways, that's a good thing. But even so, for those of us that helped build this, with hard toil, with sweat, tears, to at the point of it going mainstream, to kind of have our businesses then taken off us for a lot of us and watch them crumble and demise and be decimated by that shift to mainstream. It's a price we've all wanted to pay at heart.
Yeah.
Of course, because it means that we've been successful and we've seen veganism go mainstream, plant-based options. And that's what we always wanted. But even so, we're all human, and the independence, it has been brutal. And just yesterday, I got an email from a stallholder to let me know that she's shutting down. She started 6 years ago. And she's been to our shows, and it's brutal. At the same time, it's coupled with the knowledge that it's like, oh yeah, well, great, we've been successful too on a bigger picture. And that's the important one. I will willingly suffer in my own way, although it has been a struggle. To see this whole mission work. And I think we always knew that. And it's the same with my other business, Yayo, and hemp products. I started the UK's first hemp business pretty much, or opened the UK's first hemp shop back in 1994. And I very much saw hemp as a solution. I was really on it 30 years ago. I was importing all the hemp from Canada, and from America. There were some great labels from Holland. From also Eastern European countries like Romania, China was producing really top quality, still is, hemp linen and hemp cloth. And that was, we used to joke then, it's like, oh, well, when we get the supermarkets, that's when we go out of business. When it's in the supermarkets, then we've won. We've done our job. And that is the lot of the independent, certainly in the vegan world. We're the pioneers, the creators, the ones that dared to do it differently and paid the price along the way. Once something becomes successful, then of course the multiples pick up on it. And for a lot of the independents, it's almost like your job is done. And you have to reinvent yourself and maybe use what you've learned in that journey to reinvent yourself and do something else with that knowledge in the same sort of field. And that's what we've done. That's exactly what we've done. We've started a third business,
Yeah.
Keep all going. Yeah. So we've now got a third.
What are you working on now?
Well, this is a community interest company. a community interest company, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, is essentially somewhere between a company and a charity. It's not as tightly controlled as a charity. It doesn't have the tax breaks that a charity does, but it is what you call a not-for-profit, really, but legally recognised. And there's some legal restrictions on what you do with funds. So if you get a lot of funding in, you can't just give it to the directors, which is what happens in a company, or can happen.
Right.
It's called asset locked, which means that it has to be redistributed back into the community. And that's why it's called a community interest company. So if any profits are made, they by law, and of course these are regulated, it goes back into the community. So it does, this opens us up, there's a trust level there. And I suppose at my age, now 62 this year, I'm ready for that, because I know what I want to do. And community interest company is called Why Go Vegan. And it's essentially vegan education.
Love it.
And the more successful it is, the more it will grow. So that's really exciting. And we're working hard on that. It should be launched in about 6 weeks at Bristol VegFest, Bristol Vegan Fest, 7 weeks. And then it'll be properly live to access and share the assets in by the summertime.
Nice.
Get working weekends. Well, that's brilliant.
Yeah. What can people expect as far as like the education piece? How will they learn when they visit Why Go Vegan?
Well, you can sign up for a 30-day challenge, and you get an email every day for 30 days. And this is quite a common path thread, obviously for January, with pioneered this approach in the UK. People at Revered do a 30 vegan challenge, which is very much food recipe focused. January one is very much an ABC. It's like really good for beginners, people who really have not come across much, got much just idea all about plant-based lifestyles. There's a really good one by the Vegan Society, which is a little bit more in depth. Goes into things like being able to do supermarket swaps, how to identify vegan products, and it's really good, like lifestyle tips, and really useful. There's a brilliant one for whole food plant-based diet by the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, which is a 21-day challenge, specifically whole food plant-based. It's all about optimum nutrition. And there's others. There's a challenge 22. There's various ones, but what they all focus on in the main is the how to go vegan. Very much food focused, and benefits of plant-based lifestyles, which is of course brilliant. But the Why Go Vegan challenge focuses very much on the why, rather than the how-tos, which has been really well covered. This is more why to. And so in this challenge, you're going to start thinking about things like the animal rights position. You've been looking at vegan values, a little bit of the history of veganism, how it's grown all over the world, the development of the vegan social movement in the UK with the formation of the Vegan Society in 1944, and those original pioneers who really did lay down some terrific essays and articulation of positions about what veganism really meant when it really first started as a social movement. So veganism goes way back over millennia, over all sorts of different cultures. But that significant point in November 1944, just over 8 years ago, when the Vegan Society was formed, and that point is really what we call the birth of the vegan social movement. It's when like-minded souls came together, formed a movement, and started trying to, grow that movement and into what is now today. We have estimated 80 million vegans worldwide. approximately 1 million ethical vegans in the UK, several million pretty much plant-based. People eat a plant-based diet nearly all the time, or all the time. And another something like 15 million people who are actively increasing plant-based options. Call it what you want. Pescatarian, flexitarian, vegetarian. I just say pretty much plant-based and plant-based friendly. You know. So you've got your vegans, you've got your pretty much plant-based, and then you've got your plant-based friendly. It's just that people who started to dabble a bit, get au fait with a chickpea and sweet potato curry or something. Yeah, so very much it's about why go vegan. We're going to look at morals, ethics, human rights and animal rights, intersectional veganism, spiritual veganism, religions, self-transformation, society transformation, and then also a bit about the vegan community and how to get involved, the vegan community, things like vegan events, some of the campaigning that's really like passive, things like, trying to get your local council to introduce more plant-based options, these kind of things, so things are really easy introduction. And I think it's really for people, particularly who are already okay with plant-based options, just don't really understand veganism. I don't see why they should bother, really. Why would we want to bother going vegan? What's at the heart of veganism? What does it all mean? What do these terms mean? What is a moral consideration? Why would some people say we have a moral imperative to act?
Yeah.
Let's put this into street terms and sit down. And what's nice about this, actually, Kimberly, unlike, you've noticed I do like talking a bit, and your listeners will, I'm sure, have noted that. When we come to the Why Go Vegan Challenge, I'm delighted to know that I am condensing huge topics into no more than 5-minute presentations.
Wow.
Each presentation is no more than 5 minutes.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like trying to condense a whole book. If you take something like, The Case for Animal Rights by Tom Reagan and condense it into less than 5 minutes. That's a real skill set, actually.
Yeah, I would say.
But that's just, so it becomes a very easy introduction and a bite-sized chunk.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for all of the organizations that you mentioned, and who knows how many others that do it too, where they're so focused on, like, let's get people eating the food, and then maybe that's an easy way to get them into it, and getting familiar with not eating animals, and I appreciate that so much, but I have felt that we are lacking in what you are talking about with Why Go Vegan, that no one's focused on, or not no one, but it's not focused on the way, like, hey, let me teach you how to make, bean burgers and love eating plants. And we're really missing those super important conversations about why, about understanding the rights, and not just for the animals, which is obviously the focus, but whenever someone says to me, you care too much about animals, what about people? And then I explain to them how there are human rights violations. Human rights are affected by us not engaging in animal rights, by the way that we are slaughtering animals and the suffering that people endure by working in these places, being exposed to this, living downwind of a pig lagoon in North Carolina. There is a concern for people as well as animals. And I think because the big picture is, look at the food, eat this food, stop eating animals, we're not having those really nuanced conversations where people can learn and truly understand what motivates us in the animal rights space.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because I think, for one thing, other social justice groups, when they look at veganism, how we present the veganism, all this food and stuff, We don't really talk about the ethics and morals. We don't talk enough about the human rights aspects at all. When I first became vegan, it was from a human rights perspective. It was at the time of Live Aid, in 1984, which at the time, those of us that remember Live Aid, it was a massive revolution. It was like the first time this came into our living rooms, and it was rock and roll that responded. Now, fair enough, when you look back at it, it was, yeah, okay, it's a bit of a tacky tune and some questionable lyrics, but at the time, oh my goodness, this was like, this is seismic. And we were so empowered as a disaffected youth, and this was my prime reason for staying vegan, not for going vegan, but for staying vegan. When I would get tempted in the early days, I would come back to the fact, well, this is the price of a life of a child. Because I knew then by this time that we were already using Ethiopia to grow cattle fodder. And in the north of the country, where little rain and what little land there was being grown for cattle fodder and sold to the UK. And, the UK staggeringly that year in 1984 imported more cattle fodder, which went to a very few farmers and mainly to leaseholders, but actually went to Western companies that owned the land and didn't even filter through to the indigenous people. Land leasing, it's called, the theft and robbery. And I was really upset about this, and I worked all this out. I don't know where I got that information. I just worked it out. In 1984, I was talking to people. I was saying, well, the price of a cup of tea, of a drop of a cup of tea in your milk in your tea this year, is the price of a child's life in Ethiopia. You have to join the dots between what's happening in the UK and what we're feeding all of this food to animals. And not only are we feeding all this food and not feeding the people who need it, but we're also taking the land and water and using it to grow more cattle fodder. So we're just having them over. And you can tell I'm all now, even now, 40 years on, I'm absolutely livid about that. I'm so emotionally just, and I used to say, well, why go vegan? It's like, yeah, so that you can, so that we can solve the starvation in this planet. And it fell on deaf ears, I have to say. No one, not even the vegans, agreed with me on that. No one seemed to be. There was this one charity, though, called VegFam that was operating. Actually, there's another one called Hippo. They're both gone there, but they were both operating. And VegFam's catchphrase was feed the hungry without using animals. It's a kind of vegan famine hunger thing. But always from my so it was only actually 10 years ago I really developed an animal rights perspective and understood an animal rights position, really started looking at this and challenging property status and looking at animals as individuals who are rights bearers and understanding, the importance of recognizing them as rights bearers, upholding those rights, aligning your lifestyle choices so you don't violate those rights, and then advocating for those rights too. It's just all a really important process. But my initial thing was absolute human rights. And absolutely now there's a big movement in, UK. I wouldn't say big, but there's a big part of the movement that says that veganism and animal rights should be only about the animals. And I very much am part of the group that says, no, this is very much interlinked. These are all areas of oppression. And if we care about the cow or the chicken, we should also have to care about farm workers and labourers and slaughterhouse workers, people whose rights have been violated by big international corporations who have no care about the people that they have employed beyond how much money they can earn and how many animals they can process. So that's a bigger part of the problem. And food justice and food sovereignty are very much part of why I go vegan. I mean, these are areas that I wouldn't say none of the groups talk about. That would be disrespectful to the ones that do, but very few do. And what I would hope to do is to help popularise this and say, hey, you know what? We can have a 5-minute chat about this. We don't have to read a book. We don't have to do a lecture. We don't have to read an academic paper or watch a bit. We can just have a quick 5-minute chat. That's it. It's it's simple, it's street. And I'm hoping very much that the wider vegan will, I mean, I call it traditional veganism because it goes back to what Leslie Cross and Donna Watson, who were two of the original, they were writing essays and having debates about veganism back in the 50s and stuff. They talk about the focus and the scope of veganism, and the focus very much on animals, and ending the use of animals. So in that respect, it's quite narrow, quite focused. But the scope is very broad. And the original vegan pioneers were, they're coming out of the Second World War. It's this time of extreme violence and deprivation and whole social upheaval. And these amazing, brave, original vegans here, like, had a really big vision for veganism, that it would really solve problems like world hunger and environmental problems. People like Kathleen Janaway were talking about this like back in the 60s and 70s, whole ecology, whole health issues and how plant-based diets, and a whole wealth of evidence now. But all of this is really important. I mean, I kind of tie it all up into what we now refer to as holistic veganism. And holistic veganism, I suppose, is the kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't want to say, it's a combination of all of it. It's an understanding of all of it, and I've always said that self-transformation is the most as important a part of veganism as anything. So if you're vegan for the animals, or if you're vegan for environment, or if you're vegan for, the health reasons, or if it's a spiritual tradition, or just because you like the sound of it, it feels cool, and it's like, yeah, why not? It sounds great. Let's do it. Because your partner's do it, your family's do it, your kids do it, parents do it, whatever. Your friends do it. Some pop stars do it. Whatever reason it is, but holistic vegan, I think, really is I suppose it's the amalgamation of all of this. I would say it's as far as we've got with it. And holistic veganism, I think holistic veganism is probably defines why go vegans is best. It kind of brings it all in and ties it all up and presents it as a really strong case. For whatever reason you are as an individual, none of us are to say what you should do, why you should do it. But we can say what veganism is and what's expected of you, where the bar is. What does veganism mean? Veganism does not mean reducing the suffering of animals. Veganism is clearly about ending the use of animals. Reducing the suffering of animals is a sort of very big side effect, which is brilliant. Kind of comes with the territory. But the goal of veganism should be absolutely clear as crystal. Is we want to end the use of all animals, or opposed to the willful commodification of all animals. That's what veganism is. And the rest of it, we build a broad scope, is absolutely as important and absolutely as relevant. But at the heart of the matter is this understanding that animals are not ours to use. And there's that key word. And it's the shortest word we use when we're talking about speciesism or exploitation or commodification or murder or all these other words. But at the end of the day, it's down to the use. Treatment, suffering, compassion, love, all of these things, justice, fairness. At the end of the day, it's about not using animals. As long as we keep that, we've got our social justice movement for animals. Enjoy the rest of the broad scope of veganism. Very much so.
Well, I think you've just given us a very good example of what we can expect at Why Go Vegan, because you got us down to one word. So That's fantastic. Thinking about that kind of disconnect that we talked about before briefly with, there's groups within veganism who are like, it's only about the animals. I'm not engaging in other social justice movements. I'm only focused on animals. And then they hear people who are engaged in both. Like I've had people say to me, like, why are you supporting XYZ? They're not vegan. They're not like, take, for example, Black Lives Matters. There was so much of like, stop spending your time. Like, it's important. Not that it's not important, but some vegans were like, why are you spending time on this, trying to educate other white people about their privilege, learning your own privilege, and trying to tell people about it to try to shift that focus when you could be taking that time and effort and focusing on the animals. And they were like, you can't be truly vegan if your focus is not animals. And there seems to be this weird like idea that is somehow veganism not a social justice movement in and of itself. And I had such a hard time and like couldn't seem to get through to those few vegans that came at me that way, where they're like, you're wasting your time over there. They're not, Black Lives Matters is not coming into the vegan space and supporting veganism, which is not completely true. There are plenty of members of Black Lives Matter who are also vegan. But it's just this, we're infighting, right? And we're like, you're doing it wrong, or you're not vegan enough, or you're
Sure.
yeah. What are your thoughts on that? And how is there a way we can start to come back together?
Yeah, well, I think just have reasonable conversations, have healthy disagreements, seek learning outcomes. What I've noted in the UK, especially over the last 10 years, is the level of discourse has got better and better and better. That's not to say that it's perfect by any means. So we've kind of, there's still outbreaks, unfortunate areas but in general, we've learned to communicate a lot better. But we're better now having what we refer to as healthy disagreements. And last year we had the Vegan Party Conference, which is great. We had a whole panel on human rights and animal rights with different people representing different parts of the movement, discussing and debating these things. And really healthy, important conversations because, like I very much recognise the need to stand against all oppression. Veganism for me is a justice for all. And when we start talking about, animal rights is only for the animals, this does two things. First of all, it narrows and reduces the broad scope of veganism. It's not necessary. We can still have a focus on animals and have a broad scope. So, it's a reductionist thing. It's only about the animals. It's very much a reductionist thing. In the same way as people go, it's only about the food. It's not about the ethics. Well, that's a reductionist strategy. And we can see benefits of that, but it's ultimately they're limited and there's no need to, because we've got that ability as humans to grasp quite a few concepts and develop ourselves and learn more and develop compassion and understanding and all sorts of things, good things, all sorts of areas, and I think the big education for a lot of us recently, in the UK particularly, I feel it's about trans people, and understanding trans people, being trans inclusive, it's for a lot of us been, it's took some work, but we can't help each other through. We understand and develop more empathy and understanding and become more trans inclusive. But more understanding also why people are not trans inclusive. It's just a growth thing, it's a healthy disagreement, it's a respectful debate. This isn't, we haven't always enjoyed that. We've had to work for that. But it's not just a reductionist thing, but it's also, I think, it kind of does the opposite. We're trying to reduce the barriers between humans and animals. We're trying to say to other humans, look, animals are really like us. We are all animals. We're all the same. We haven't got a species barrier. We're trying to get rid of that. So saying, it's only about the animals and ignoring what's happened to humans, it's just building that barrier back up again. But it comes from a place, I understand that, so respectful of that place. And it doesn't necessarily mean, you're racist. It probably means that you haven't, dealt with that area yet, and that you need to, and that there's some fragility and resistance. But in time, and especially as other people do and demonstrate that they can have involved, grown-up conversations in public about areas of a sensitive nature and have supportive conversations, especially seek a learning outcome. And what we've seen is punitive, puritanical, exclusionary outcomes because people have been intolerant and have not been seeking a learning outcome. They've been seeking to go, oh, well, you're not good enough. We're going to exclude you. Mm-hmm. Rather than say, well, let's understand this. Why are you supporting Black Lives Matter? Rather than, we went through a lot of that 4 or 5 years ago in the UK too. I would say now our movement is in a very healthy state on a lot of levels. Certainly see this at the conferences. There's the Vegan Party conference in the autumn time, but there's also the Vegan and Animal Rights conference in the springtime in the UK now. So twice a year we're seeing major kind of gatherings, campaign groups, grassroots activists, and also some are doing vegan outreach, some are doing single issue campaigns, some are still doing welfare campaigns, although less so. And you won't probably find that at the Vegan Party conference because we're more of an animal rights focus. But the level of discourse has improved so much. And I'm thrilled to say that last year we had a panel right at the end, which was about leadership, encouraging leadership in the movement. We had some genuine leaders. We had the leader of Pro-Veg, we had the leader of Animal Rising, we had the leader of Viva, and we had another leader, his name escapes me, and I'm going to get into trouble because I should know these things. I didn't brief myself properly. But we had some genuine leaders up there of groups, of the biggest groups in the UK, and they were disagreeing quite strongly, but respectfully. And this was brilliant, And I remember thinking how much, I put that conference together, and I put the panels together and the speakers, and I kind of overseen it. I remember scratching my head at the end of it and thinking, well, I've got 2 panelists here. So directly the opposite of what I personally believe or agree with or support. And I've got another 2 panelists who are kind of up in arms about what they're saying. Absolutely steam coming out of their ears. But I thought, how healthy is that? Yeah. What a great optic. And what a great achievement to be able to disagree so strongly and yet so respectfully. And all of us want to learn from each other. Even if we disagree strongly, we're all going to listen in. Now, that's really encouraging. So, these things take time. Moral evolution, society transformation, working on oneself. We're here to learn, and we're here to help each other learn and try and be supportive. Yeah, veganism doesn't exclude marginalized groups. If it does, it becomes white veganism, which is really, a corporate version, sanitized corporate version that is miles away from the original radical position of the vegan social.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Let's hope yet.
Everything you just said, I think I'm so glad that it's been recorded. So now it can be out in the world and people can hear it because we need to hear it. And I am inspired and a little jealous that there is a meaningful conversation happening in the UK, because here in the US, it feels like we're going in the opposite direction, and not even just politics, but it kind of feels like you can't have a conversation at all if you don't agree 100% on anything.
I have friends in America, vegans. Back in 2015, 16, 17, quite a lot of American people come over from America to talk at our events. We had a whole pro-intersectional conference, actually. We had Dr. Bruce Harper joining us by Skype. We had Christopher Spass in there. We had, some really interesting, dynamic speakers. Brenda Sanders, who organises Baltimore Soulfest. Some amazing people. AFCO was going to come. I had to cancel last minute, unfortunately, to so we had some really, really great people. We had some brilliant influence. We also had a number of other people too, and I have to be honest that when I look at some of my colleagues from America, the vegan circles, anti-vax, chemtrails, Trump supporters, QAnon, all sorts of and I can't comment on the pages anymore. I no longer post or share with some of my friends who I would have done, and I still respect them, and I kind of got a love for them, but we're on another planet. There's no point in me going on there and saying anything. There's no point in me challenging, anti-trans. That's the bit that really gets me. It's like, oh, the whole thing, transgender is an agenda and blah, blah, blah. It's like, whoa, hold on. Excuse me. How dare you? But no, I had to kind of, there's no point. I know that. It's a waste of energy to shut up and just, I don't want to exclude him or lose these people from my life because I still value a big part of them. But I see what you're saying. And I mean, we don't have that much in our vegan circles. Most of our vegan people, I mean, there's one or two people go off the rails and go and do stupid things in public. But it usually is younger people who've relapsed and maybe got unhealthy, and then they've gone and decided to go and, I don't know, eat salmon again or eat some animal product that they think is going to do them good. And actually, it's just an illness they've developed in themselves that they haven't quite sorted out, and balance or something. No, they kind of sort themselves out. They come back, join the fun again, But generally speaking, our vegan, I don't want to call them leaders, but high-profile vegans. We've got a few that are on the media quite a lot. And I'd say they're all pretty good, except for one thing. There's a number of the high-profile people speaking about veganism don't think have yet quite grasped or I don't want to put them down. I don't want to suggest. I don't think they've considered closely that animal rights position. I think they don't. I think they still see animals as commodities, not to use. They're not looking at veganism as ending the use of animals. They're looking at veganism as trying to use less animals. But but that takes time. That doesn't always happen overnight. That understanding. You can be perhaps an environmental vegan or a health vegan and promote a lot of good stuff. And then maybe one day something comes along, and says, "Hey, what about the actual individuals here? You're throwing them under the bus, and you haven't even noticed." And this comes in with things like reduction and stuff, and start people talking about reduction. It's like, whoa, hold on, these are individual sentient beings we're talking about. We're not talking about reduction. We're talking about ending the use. That has to be our goal. And although there may be strategies that we may consider to achieve that, it's really important, I think, as a vegan spokesman, to demonstrate that we thoroughly understand veganism and the goal of it is to end the use of animals.
Yeah. I've worked with people who were going vegan and would say, well, like, my end goal is being vegan. I'm taking it in steps.
Yeah.
Can I tell people I'm vegan? And my answer is always, and some people get upset because I'm so precious about the word, but I feel like it's important that veganism maintains what it means. And so we can easily understand when someone says I'm vegan, we know what that means. I always tell them, you can tell people you're going vegan, you're working towards being vegan, but no, don't start saying I'm vegan and then you're still eating chicken on occasion or cheese or whatever it is. And at first they're always like, oh, but that seems like, aren't we kind of splitting hairs? And when I talk to them about that definition, we're ending the exploitation, ending the use of animals. We're not just kind of using them when it's convenient or when it's not convenient, and then they kind of like, oh, okay, I get it. And then that just really strengthens, I think, even their motivation to keep moving toward being able to call themselves vegan.
Oh, Kimberly, talking of American friends, I had an absolutely really good friend who I think is pretty busy now bringing up his kids, sort of lost touch post-COVID. He used to come to our shows pre-COVID. That's Dr. Casey Taft. Casey Taft is East Coast, you know, East Coast America. And he wrote a book back in 2015, I think 10 years ago, called Motivational Methods for Vegan Advocacy.
Mm.
And Dr. Taft, who's by profession, he works with violence, domestic violence. He treats people, patients with extreme domestic violence. He's got a real big, 30-year history background in this. He's a top man for it. Highly respected, and he's been vegan, and he wrote this book very much about sort of behavioural patterns and how important it is to be clear about the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And it's set the bar, and it's really the bar is set. It's not for us to set it. Veganism sets the bar. It's just it's a way of life that seeks to end the use of all animals. So that's the bar. Now we understand you can't always get to the bar straight away. That many of us take steps by nature. We go vegetarian, start cutting out, and da 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 da. But when we're advocates, we should be trying to be clear with people. We should be supportive, and we should encourage, and we shouldn't shame or exclude, but we're seeking an outcome where we no longer use animals as a default position. And so if we're not clear about that bar, then people don't know. And there's a lot of clinical psychology, there's evidence-based that will back up that human change, is best off when you know where the bar is. And then you'll work towards the bar. And if the people around you, like your teachers or your coaches or whatever, in this case, people perhaps who are vegan, who are mentoring or helping, encourage friends, you shouldn't drop the bar and go, oh, yeah, that's fine. You keep the bar, but keep encouraging and helping and being empathize. And, somebody slips off, it's like, yeah, okay, let's look at how we can, or somebody stuck on cheese is the big one, isn't it? It's okay, let's explore how we can, and let's just say, oh, well, actually, let's go vegan except for the cheese. That's great. Well done, well done. Call yourself a vegan, that'll do. Never mind about that. It's like, no, But at the same time, if somebody isn't hitting those the bar, shouldn't give up on them. We should perhaps just stay friends with them and just be kind of, inclusive and just keep having those conversations. Just lead by example if you want. And just, it's frothing a whole foot food in front of them and stuff like that. But be nice to them. Just be nice to people, really, be kind and supportive, but be clear.
Yeah.
And that's partly what White Vegans are going to try and do is go, hey, you know what? We can have this conversation. We don't have to disagree strongly. We don't have to have kind of us and them kind of thing. We actually find shared values and common ground. And still have a totally reasonable conversation about respecting animals' rights and not using them as commodities without pushing people away.
Right. Yes. We do want to bring more people into the movement. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. The more of us that are doing this, the more impact we can have in the systems that oppress the animals, that oppress people. And we can reach that point where all of us have stopped using and exploiting animals.
And that's the way I see this change happening. It is individual change. That's what's pushing. I don't see so much value in system change because system change will change with individual change. Not always, know that, but we're seeing some of the system change attempts in the UK. And that's actually one of the debates we're going to have. This is the big new, I wouldn't say argument, the debate is whether we should be focusing on individual change or system changes in animal rights. I mean, the answer is both, because we already are, so it makes sense to keep working on both. But what should we be really focusing on? I'm definitely in the idea of individual change, people working together and helping affect that change is our principal tool, because I don't trust the corporations and institutions to change because they know it's the right thing to do, because they're not going to respond to reason in the same way as as individuals can.
Mm-hmm.
They've got vested interests and they're going to stick to them. And I see this particularly with current campaigns, RSPCA,
Mm-hmm.
horse racing. The RSPCA, the horse racing bodies, just come back with welfare reforms. And it placates things, and it doesn't really change anything.
Right. Yeah.
But that's not to put this on system change. I value system change. It's really important. I mean, something like what the Plant-Based Treaty do is extraordinary. I tip my hat. And all the brave souls involved, absolute respect to everything. But yeah, I think it's a really good conversation to have. Ultimately, I do support both very much. But if you ask me which I would favour, it's very much just individual change.
Mm-hmm.
I believe individual change will push system change. And you've seen that a bit with things like veganuary. It's changed the high street, changed the supermarkets, because veganuary proved that there's a pattern, there's a dollar. And that's when the institutions changed.
Yeah.
They said, the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, they had a really interesting conversation, that one.
Yeah.
We respect that all advocates, whatever your position, if you're out there, whatever you're doing, the thing is to keep doing what you're doing and keep learning and open to different ways and different strategies and different focuses.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing is to keep going, and we want to encourage people, whatever you're doing, really. But whatever you are doing, be aware that some of it can be counterproductive. That's a tough one, rights advocate, to work out. Some of it can be counterproductive. Yeah, got to watch your step, haven't you? It's not all.
The first time I spoke with someone who felt like focusing on the system was more important than focusing on the individual, I was surprised, because what she had said was, it's less meaningful for you to go vegan than it is for you to engage with the systems and make them stop using animals. And I thought, one, what a terrible message to send to the individuals, because now they think, well, I'm doing enough by trying to convince my local politician to pass some thing, or a company, some CEO I'm friends with, trying to convince them to stop using animals in whichever way their organization does. And they never look at themselves. But I'm like totally with you in that if we are changing ourselves, that's the only way to impact the money that they're making, to make them see, like you said, that there's money to be made when you're in the business mindset. There's money to be made here in this vegan aspect of things. But I think ultimately, if we can just keep changing everyone, no one will want those systems, and we will change them because we have changed ourselves, and our culture is different, and our culture doesn't view animals as a means to an end, as a way to get something that we want or we need. And like, it's not going to happen overnight for sure. But for me, that just feels like the more effective path is to work individually.
Yeah, and it's also important, as I spoke about, the focus and the scope. The beauty is the scope of veganism is just so far-reaching and so broad, so life-enhancing. If you're not going vegan, you're missing out so much on that whole transformational process.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely, I'm down with Leslie Cross and Donna Watson talked about the moral evolution of mankind. This is it, veganism. When I was first vegan, and people used to say, "Yeah, I'd say, why are you vegan?" It's like, if I didn't want to go into it, which quite often I didn't really, I was just like, it's just basic, just tick so many boxes. It's like, why wouldn't you be vegan? Come on, if you care about this, that, the other, all that, you care about world hunger, you care about the environment, you care about your health, you care about what's happening to rivers or oceans, or climate change, or if you care about what's happening to animals, or if you care what's happening to free living beings in the habitats, and the extinction of species, if you care about these things, why wouldn't you be vegan?
Right.
Vegan is not a perfection, but it does enough encompass so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that you can do system change and individual change at the same time too. You can encourage people on an individual level to be vegan. And I use the analogy on that actually is if you're at school and you're a parent and you're part of 50 parents and with kids, and you want to introduce, you want the school to go vegan. On the one hand, it would be great value to sit down and have an individual conversation with the people who make the changes, like the head teacher or the people who are in charge of the cooking, or the people who set the budgets, the governors, and have a one-to-one conversation about morals and ethics and animals and environment. But on the other hand, if you're then having perhaps a parent meeting and you want to make an institutional change here, then of course you're going to have a consensus. And so you would probably look for saying, well, look, let's introduce one plant-based meal a week and see how that goes. And then let's try and get a plant-based option on the menu all the time and see if we can have a consensus on that. And then step by step, institution, you work towards maybe, actually, you've only got animal products on the menu one day a week now, and the default is plant-based. Maybe there comes a time when there's no animal products on it. But you can have both, and you can have individual conversations with the key policymakers, and you can have about the importance of being vegan or teaching vegan, and you can have a consensus about a plant-based meal or two that requires a consensus and therefore some kind of compromise from your but both achieve, and we know that if you want system change or institution change or corporation change, it has to be by consensus. There's no other way. So it's not about an individual making a change in themselves. It's about a consensus, a different goal. And you're not going to get plant-based menus on the menus unless you're prepared to meet people and have a consensus. So it's different structures of that. But again, I say there's no reason why you can't do both. And even at the same time, just pick your spot. People who are resistant to it all, just look to try and get the consensus and an agreement where you've got a share. People are perhaps open to it. It's like, hey, let me come and talk to you. Let me buy you a drink. I'll buy you a coffee. Let me talk to you about veganism. But yeah, But I understand from a group's perspective, that's a little bit trickier because you've got policies, you've maybe got media presentation, you've got to have a strategy. So it's not as easy to pass. As advocates, we should be able to do both. Yeah, sure.
Agreed. Tim, I could talk to you all day, but I don't know. I don't know if anybody would listen to a 6-hour podcast.
That's been very interesting. Yes, good to find that we've got so much in common about our approach to it all. I think this will be the default over the next 10 years. Veganism will start going back. So we've had the plant-based revolutions last decade in many respects. Plant-based, all sorts of people have to go plant-based now. Mainstream, all over. The animal rights revolution was next. And I think it's 5 years. By the end of this decade, we'll have seen a very strong re-emergence of that concept.
Yeah. Well, if Why Go Vegan needs a US component, please let me know. I want to be
on it. It can definitely be able to access it. We can maybe change it a bit for the US market. Do a US version. Yeah.
Excellent. Right. Yes. I'd love to be part of that. Tim, I've got one more question for you before we go. How does hummus show up in your life?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question because hummus is massive. When I was 7, I went to live in Greece, and hummus entered my life then. From 7, 8 years old, of course, you get it in the meze in Greece. You always get hummus, and a bit of bread is like kind of default. You almost get it served without ordering, which just appears. So it's there to eat. I always loved hummus. And when it came to giving up dairy, which we all had to do at some stage if you weren't born vegan, you had to transition. I was already eating hummus. So hummus had just become, and I never missed cheese or butter or that kind of stuff. Always just slap hummus on. And of course, the beauty too is you could buy like hummus and maybe a baguette and some lettuce, maybe some olives, almost anywhere. So when I was traveling, which I was a lot, places like France and Holland and Spain, you could keep, you could buy hummus just about anywhere. So I was a massive part. And then when I first went vegan, I was, as I mentioned, living whole food, so I didn't really eat out or anything. But then after about 9 months, I went to London. It's the first time I was challenged about, I ain't got me cooking, I ain't got me pot here, I ain't got me lentils. What am I going to eat? And so obviously you can buy stuff like apples and snack bars and, nuts and things. It's just great. But like hummus, and the beauty of hummus is not only can you buy it in the supermarkets, which even in the 80s in the UK, every supermarket had hummus. But there was all these kebab shops all over London. If you go to London, pretty much every street, you've got a kebab shop. And they're not only open until about 3 a.m, which is particularly good if you were sort of party people, which I was. And it's just like, get to the point of the day, and it's like, I need to eat. What time is it? Oh, it's 2:30 in the morning. I know. Not only could you go and find a place that was open, but they'd always have a tub of hummus, salad. But anywhere in London in the 80s, you want to eat out, it's like, hummus, pita bread. And I know, as I developed in the 90s, I was so fixated by hummus that I used to buy it by like the tub full, like a massive great tub. And just eat it. Eat it like ice cream. So yeah, I do love hummus. I think you probably gathered I'm a massive hummus fan, and I probably eat hummus every day. I have 3 or 4 different varieties of hummus, and I eat it a lot. I love it. I think it's fair to say that hummus over the last 40 years has been when it comes to vegan diet, has been my best friend. Mm-hmm. It's been my best friend. Because anywhere I gone, anywhere in the world, I went all over the world. You always find hummus. And it was such a godsend. The amount of times I've just eaten hummus.
Yeah.
Breakfast. Yeah, so there you go. And so when I saw it, your whole podcast,
I love it.
Hummus. Get me on that one. Right. How do I rate? How do I rank as sort of in the top 20 hummus aficionados?
Yeah. I don't know. I think you might be the number one.
A 40-year history of championing hummus. Yeah. Of course, the other thing with Kimberly is it's always been part of my advocacy, particularly in the early days. So I didn't really want to talk about veganism. I just wanted to live it. Mm-hmm. Let people ask me, really, and just kind of show. It's like, what's that you're eating? It's going, it's hummus. Yeah. I said, what's hummus? I said, right, for starters, it's vegan. So that's number one. I haven't got any dead animals. It's like, right, let me taste it. It's like, that's not too bad, is it? It's like, yeah, you can buy it anywhere. Next time you fancy a sandwich without a bit of dead something in it, you buy some hummus. So it's been a tremendous advocacy tool.
Yeah, for me as well. I love it. I love sharing it. Love having conversations over a nice tub of hummus and some great bread and vegetables. It really has the ability to bring us together for sure. Well, thank you, Tim, so much for being here with me today. I have loved this conversation and I cannot wait to get it out for the listeners to hear.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. I really enjoyed it. I hope the listeners, if you're still listening, thank you. Well done. Done us proud. That's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back. What a conversation. I really enjoyed the way Tim took us to the moment each time he was telling a story, giving us insight into the political climate of the time, helping us to understand not just what was happening, but why. To connect with Tim and to support his work, visit his websites, vegfest.co.uk, whygovegan.org.uk, yao.co.uk, YAOH, and find him on Facebook at VegFest UK. You'll find these links in the show notes. I hope you found this episode helpful and inspiring. Please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're loving it, please give Did You Bring the Hummus a 5-star rating and leave a review. It's an easy way to keep supporting the show. Be sure to share these episodes with your friends. If you're finding something good here, they will too. If you're a vegan or know a vegan who would be a great fit for the podcast, follow the Be a Guest link in the show notes. Fill out the quiz and I'll be in touch. Get on my mailing list and stay up to date on all things Did You Bring the Hummus? Get more info on how you can sign up for a meditation, one of my programs, or to support the podcast via the links in the show notes. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Did You Bring the Hummus, and visit my website, didyoubringthehummus.com, for more information about me, updates on what I'm working on, new podcast episodes, and all things vegan. Finally, I would love to hear from you. What do you need help with? Is there a topic you want to hear covered on a future episode? DM me on Instagram or send me an email at info@didyoubringthehummus.com. Thanks for listening.